Hello there. In this video, what we're going to do is take a look at how to build region adapters. So as we're kind of building out support for our next provider, which is DevExpress, you'll notice here that we have this project that we use for testing. It's one of them is got this provider for DevExpress. We have this other one for development and Telerik and so forth. And basically, this is an advanced video, so if you haven't actually played around or you've watched some of the other videos on DockShell and the framework, it might be a good idea to kind of pause this video and then come back to it, because you might get a bit lost as to what we're doing and what the objective is. But so basically, in what we're going to do is have a bit of a series, multiple videos, where we take a look at a problem statement. In this case, we need to provide support for syncing commands into a very specific type of DevExpress UI element. And in this case, it's called the DxBar control. And so what we want to do is we want to build a PRISM Region Adaptor to be able to do that, and or to be able to accept UI elements through region adaptation techniques, if that makes any sense. And so the first thing that we want to do is kind of look at the problem statement from a UI perspective. And if we do that, we have this test project here. And if I was to, for example, let's say change this to file view, and then if I go down, you can see this is a standard DockShell kind of implementation, where we have this solution folder called DockShell, and we have another solution folder in there, which is just turn that off, the model itself. And if we open up the model, no surprises here. This is basically, it looks very similar if you've ever worked with DockShell on Telerik. It's basically the same thing, but you'll notice here that we have a single region. That's because we're struggling a little bit, and we're trying to work through, sort of the ability to sync commands into this particular region. Now, what we have is, or what we hope to have, is that this is a view container, and in this view container, we want to have a DxBar or DxBar manager. And in that DxBar manager, multiple bars, and each bar we want to tag it with a region tag, so that we can use this named region concept, so we can sync commands. So in this case, this red region adapter is basically identified as a data command, or data type commands. And the idea being is that this is the screen. So when the screen opens up, we in fact want commands that are identified as data type commands, which are the ones that are identified here in red. They would sync inside this region. In other words, these types of commands here would automatically sync into these regions. So there's other videos that kind of explain what is going on, or what happens with respect to that. But this is the first video that really dives into, hey, we've got this problem where we have this kind of disconnected scenario where we don't have support for a specific UI element or command. And so in our ongoing series of we're going to identify how to resolve this and how to build out the specific supporting components within your adapter. And it's very important because although we're just providing support for syncing UI elements that are of type command, the same principles apply within PRISM and within the DockShell framework for any type of UI control. So in other words, if the concept is very simple. You get to a point where you identify a component, and you identify it by a region tag, and once you have that component identified, you can then drag and drop elements, UI elements and fragments and so forth, into those areas. And then at runtime, DockShell will compose that on your behalf, and use inversion of control to kind of pull everything together and wire everything together. So it's kind of how it all works. But first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to back up a little bit here, because I do have a couple of properties that I need to turn off so that we can actually run the application. And let's do that first. So I'm going to minimize that. And so the properties that I want to turn off are actually associated to these commands right now. So right now, what I found was that, well, I don't have really good support. I'm not actually able to target these view containers, and specifically that region, this data region within the view container. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn it off so we can see the running application before we do our work, and then over the series we're going to develop out a solution. So I'm going to turn that to false, and the same thing for this one. These two, when I was testing, I had them turned on, so I'm just going to turn them off. Okay, and let's run the application as it is, and let's see how it looks, and we'll talk about, and we'll come back and then talk about what we're going to do. So let me start the application. Okay, so you can see the application has come up, and this is just a base shell that you can modify. It's a standard kind of DockShell approach where you take the shells and make your own shells and so forth. And so this tab that's in here is actually embedded into the shell, but these two are actually derived tabs that come from your LightSwitch application. And I will just revert back to the screen for a second just to kind of highlight that. In the LightSwitch application that we're playing around with right now, it actually has this home tab, a navigation group in LightSwitch, and then it has this employees tab, and it of course has the default administration and this unmapped screens tab. There's other videos that kind of explain what this is all about, but essentially 2 ribbon tabs that'll surface normally unless you have administration capabilities, which I don't have turned on. Which are home and employees, and you can see here that employees is sharing the docking container for the ribbon, the home ribbon. So that's kind of cool. But again, this is all standard DockShell kind of stuff, and you know, all of this stuff gets transformed into a set of classes, partial classes that get compiled into your LightSwitch application, and then the DockShell shell extension actually interprets those at runtime to build out the UI. So the actual shell that we're looking at is actually derived from this particular control, and that control is actually part of the provider project, which every provider will have at least one shell example, which is this one here. So if I were to open up this shell, for example, you can see that as it opens up, it's very much that definition that we see at runtime. You know, this is the same thing. So basically, you know, what you have here is the ability to kind of craft up your own shell, and then within that shell, you know, you have identification points, and those identification points are these very specific named regions. Well, in this case here, they are regions that are endpoints that are targetable by other UI elements. That's PRISM, and that's how it all works. And of course, we have supporting region adapters for these particular endpoints. That is actually not where our problem statement lies in this particular video series that we're about to go through. But it is related. That's why I sort of pointed it out. What is very interesting here is that if we go back to our running application, I was to hit customers, there's actually going to be an error. And the error is being created because, and this, I purposely wanted to kind of take us into this scenario here and kind of understand, you know, that there's work to do. And the work is because if we were to look here, at this particular definition for this view container, we will see that it's kind of half-baked. In other words, there's some componentry that we still have to build in order to support this. So just to kind of prove this out, what I'll do is I'm going to go back to our DevExpress and look at our default screen container, which is where I know the particular issue lies. And we'll stop the running code, for example, so that we can get in and do that. And let's go in there. All right, and so this is where we're having our challenges right now. This is the view container that we want to actually come up when, and this is the thing that has the validation summary control on it. but I know for a fact that this is where the error is happening. So let's take a look. Let's first of all remove the area of concern. So the area of concern is really this piece right here, this DxBar piece, and this is kind of like a work in progress. And anytime that we're building out regions, this is kind of the process that we go through. And you can see here that we've got this DX bar manager, and this bar manager has a collection of bars. And what we're trying to do is create a bar, give it a region name, which if you recall, when you look at the model, that little red dot that you're seeing here, if I was just to go and look at the properties of that, okay, you'll notice here that its name is Screen Data Commands Region, and if you go back to here, that's in fact what this is called right here. So if we scroll across, you can see it's Screen Data Commands Region. In other words, the way PRISM works is that once you have an adapter for this particular a PRISM Region Adapter for this type of control, you can just give it a name, and then using our modeling tool, you can wire complementary or compatible UI elements into that region. And then at runtime, DockShell will request MEF to get those components that you've, those targetable components from your various projects or provider projects or your actual LightSwitch application. And then it will ask PRISM to find that region and by that name in that specific scoped area and insert that element there. So the challenge we have right now is that we don't have a supporting region adapter for bar. So when we try to open up the screen and it tries to do all that work, in fact what happens is it throws an exception. So what we're going to do first is we're going to remove the bar manager so that we can get it back to a point where it's running, right? So we'll just comment that out, and hopefully that's acceptable. Oh, I got one extra. Let me just do this, and we'll just stick that down here. So now we've commented out the bar, and so that's fine. And I think that's all we need to do. So we need to save that. And so because we're building this inside our provider, we first want to build our provider project. Going to build out that change. And it wouldn't be a bad idea to actually build this in a separate project, but the region adapters that we're supporting region adapter that we're going to eventually build is actually going to be in this provider project. So the region adapter, if you recall, what we're trying to do is build some type of logic that when PRISM goes to take some component and inject it into this thing called a DxBar, it knows how to do that. And right now it doesn't. And that's in fact why we're seeing that exception, right? So we have that done the way we want it, compiled rather, the way we want to do. And now what we do is we have a technique where we, on the post-compile of this provider project, we copy the assembly into a target test project. This is what we're doing down here. And it's specifically so that when I then right-click and compile this project, I'm actually getting the latest change from this particular provider, shell provider. And so that should take a second. All right, so now that that's compiled, so what we want to do now is go back to our model, and you'll notice here that we still see these regions, even though I commented out that area, and that's because we have one more step. We have to refresh our model, and that's simply by right-clicking and refreshing the model itself. And you can see that those region tags disappear, right? So I think it's pretty clear now that this default container is actually coming from, if we pull this up, it is coming from something that implements DockShell view container, and that's actually derived from this provider screen container, and this is the particular element. Now this provider, we don't have the metadata set up yet. That's kind of like the last step that we go through. And so you're not seeing the metadata down here, which is just down in this area here, but that's easily added at the tail end of this. We'll clean that up. All right, so next thing we want to do is let's just rerun the application and make sure it does function properly. And one thing I wanted to point out is that we were doing some earlier testing where we have these groups split containers and view group controls. So we are allowing or implementing a scenario where customer orders group was always going to be on top of an employee group. An employee group had one screen, which is employee list detail, and the customer orders group has two screens in it. So when we run this, you'll see that effect happening. And there's another video that explains sort of some override logic that was built to allow that to happen. So let's just run this and see what it looks like. All right, so as the application spins up, notice that once LightSwitch determines the navigation groups that the user has access to, they'll surface on the UI. All right, so now hopefully when I press customers, it'll actually render the screen for us. Let's take a look. And sure as you're born, there it is. Thank goodness. So the view container is functioning now because we don't have that bar manager and issue that we had earlier giving us grief, right? So I just wanted to point out sort of the aspects that we were looking at before, which we were discussing about the groups and the split container. So this is actually two screens that are sitting inside a view group control, which is in this case a DevExpress panel control or panel layout control, layout group control rather, and then inside that is also inside what we call a split container, which is also another DevExpress layout group control. And so now if we open up employees, you'll notice that it opens up on the bottom, which is this is basically the orientation that we're looking to achieve. And if we were to let's say close all this stuff down and open it up where we open up employees first, you see employees opens up. Now what's happened here is that employees, if we go back to our model, you'll notice that we've opened up this. So this did not exist. So it first creates this, then it creates this, and then it opens up the screen. And when it opens up the screen, it creates this view container, which is the XAML we were just looking at that we commented out the region on. And the end result is that we get the screen. And now if I go back over to my home tab and open up my customer screen, you'll notice that customers opens up above, always above. And the logic that does this or manages this is actually inside the override, which is part of another video. But what we need to do now is that what we want to do is we want to take these commands, these save and refresh commands, and we want to create a toolbar that sits on top here. And we want to use the DxBar manager, and we want to use the DxBar control from DevExpress to be able to do that. In order for us to do that, we're going to need to create what's called a region adapter, and that's why that exception occurred at the start of the video. And we purposely wanted to take you through that to show you the challenges that exist if, in fact, you're missing these types of components. And so we'll just close that down. And the next thing I want to do is kind of look at a region adapter and look at kind of how they get pulled into the overall equation. So let's just close all these windows down. And what we're going to do is we'll expand this here and look at the collection of region adapters that we currently have. So we have this thing called the DX window region adapter, which was one of those things that we had to build in order to kind of pull this DevExpress provider together. And that's just basically a region adapter that supports a DX window. And region adapters are really simple. Basically, in a region adapter, they have a number of methods. There's a active view collection changed event that you need to support sometimes. It depends on your needs. And then certainly you'll always need to support collection changed. That is if it's a collection type control. And that is controlled or determined by the type of region that you're type of adapter that you're building. And you can see here that in this sort of lambda expression we have this switch statement, which is determining whether the operation is an add or remove or replace. And in the case of the replace, we'll do nothing for this particular type of control. But in the case of add, you can see here that what we get passed is this thing called an item, and item is actually coming in is enumerated through this parameter that gets passed in this e parameter that has this collection of new items. And essentially what we're doing is we're just taking whatever that item is and we're setting it to be the content of this region target. And the region target is, in this case, a DX window. On remove, so when PRISM is being asked to remove something from that type of region, it will call through this code, which basically just nullifies the content. And so that's basically how it works. And so what we need to do now is, if we go back to our screen container, and so what we have is the, if we scroll down a little bit here, we can see that this is that commented out code. And at the end of the day, what we're hoping to achieve is to build a region adapter that is based on a DxBar control. And essentially that DxBar control, we want to just be able to insert these, as many as we'd like, inside this bars collection within this bar manager. And so the DockShell knows how to take a compatible UI element and inject it into that simply by targeting a region. And so when the way PRISM works is that once we have this region name, it will, and when we go to actually push the command into this region, it will look at that region. It will say, this is a DxBar, and then it'll say, do I have any region adapters? Do I have any PRISM adapters that I can utilize to handle whatever it needs to handle as far as binding that UI element into the collection that we're trying to target? So that's kind of like the objective and where we're going with this video series. And the last point I wanted to point out is that, and we'll see this as we kind of progress through the next video, but within each provider, not only do you define these individual region adapters, but you also need to register those region adapters at the start of the application. And the way that's done is actually, I believe it's in this catalog registry code here. So we scroll down, so you can see here that there's this register region adapters method, and this gets called at the start of the application. And you can see here that it's in here that we're registering each one of these region adapters. And so once we build the region adapter for a DxBar control, we will add that to the register mappings collection of this region adapter mappings. And so it'll automatically be there at the start. Prior to any usage of it, it will be registered within PRISM, and so PRISM will know exactly that there is this type of region. All right, that ends part one. Stay tuned for part two, where we will actually go through the actual implementation of a DxBar region, and hopefully you've enjoyed this so far, and look forward to seeing you in the next video. Cheers.